Hello and welcome back to the Overlap Breakdown channel. As always, I'm joined by my co-host Umir, who's a professional football scout and analyst, and we're here today to talk about if football has become too robotic and, more importantly, too boring. It's a really interesting question, I think, in general, and I think for two people who analyse the game day in, day out.
I mean, people will say we're part of the problem.
Yeah, we're part of the problem kind of thing. So we're gonna have a say on this. I think it's really interesting that people who obviously look for the in-depth details of the game every single week. It's really interesting to see if we also think that it's boring, too systematic. I'm gonna just kick the question off to you and say we're mid-20s.
Yeah,
we'll
keep it broad.
Mid-20s. We're in your lifetime, do you think football at the moment, I'm trying to think of the right word to say, I'm not sure if it's like systematic, boring, like
predictable,
yeah. Do you think football is got to a point now where it's too predictable? I like that word.
I would say, look, first and foremost, even if we're working in football, even if like our jobs require research and analysis and understanding how all of these sort of tactics and whatever work, like first and foremost, we're fans. Like football is like, as children, as teenagers growing up, like the best part of football is watching your team score like a 90th minute winner and
celebrate.
Yeah, like I still watch football as a fan for enjoyment. In my head, like when I do watch football, I almost have to switch my thinking between like watching it as a fan and watching it almost
emotional.
For work. Yeah, exactly.
In depth. Yeah.
And what I would say is, there are sort of more broad examples of football becoming a bit more sort of regimented, a bit more predictable. I think there's a benefit for me slightly because obviously as somebody who's interested in tactics, who's interested in sort of the fine details of football, I can appreciate and get some enjoyment out of a game that's sort of 0-0 and a team set us up really deep. And I'm a Manchester City fan. I've watched Guardiola have 75% of the ball in his Manchester City sides against teams that are sitting deep, and I find joy in that because one, we're winning, that's always enjoyable, and two, we're in control, and I appreciate also the fact that like how we're winning and sort of the little moments that our team gets through sort of tight spaces and things like that. For a general spectator, especially one who's kind of watched their teams and watch football in general be this sort of end-to-end game with big personalities and these individual, we call them Mavericks almost, expressing their quality. It's no doubt that sort of individuality was certainly lost and reducing in its frequency for a good number of years. I think we're slightly starting to see that come back a bit.
Yeah, there's a little bit more individuality.
You look at the likes of Cole Palmer, for example, or Jude Bellingham. So it's slightly coming back, which is nice. But generally, the way teams set up, I think some of that excitement and what we see as excitement in football has certainly been. I think it's not unfair to say it's been taken out a little bit.
No, I think the general point that I would have in terms of the question about is football becoming too predictable, I think we've almost got to a point now with football where we often speak about this, we mention it every single time we set a team up. It's like everyone pretty much has the same shape on the ball and they want to do the same thing and it's maximum efficiency. And it's how do you get enough players in the front line to score a lot of goals, and how do you have enough players in the midfield and the defence to have enough to prevent and counter-attacks and stuff like that. And that is the shape of a 3-2-5 or a 3-1-6, depending on the opposition. And that is like been what it's been for 5 years now in the Premier League. And every single manager now is coaching a way to get 5 bodies in the line, or is coaching a way to get 3 players at the back at all times, because they know that if we have a middle centre half, 2 wide centre halves, then you can cover man to man with a striker and 2 wingers, and that is the rational thinking behind it. But what's happening is every team now looks the same on the ball, and the principles are different. So like the pace of the ball, the directness, the speed, everything is different, and the individuals obviously make a different game of football. But what you have now is every single team playing 3-2-5 on the ball, and then a form of a 4-4-2, a 4-2-3-1, a 4-1-4-1, whatever it is, off the ball. And I was actually speaking to someone about this over the weekend, and I wanted to get your opinion on it. If the structures if the structures are what they are right now, which is the same every single week for most teams, then do you think the job of a coach is obviously to train the players and develop the players technically? But I think one of the most important aspects of being a good coach now is in-game management. Yeah. And I think it's what separates some of the good managers to the great managers in the game at the moment are the tweaks in the game. Yeah. Because everyone, like, if I'm managing Manchester United, I know what my opposition team is going to do. And I'm going to have a system at Man United where I set up on the ball, off the ball, and the other team probably knows what I'm going to do. The problem is, you need to stop it. You need to stop the individual quality. Yeah. And I feel like to do that, there's only so much you can do systematically to prevent the other team. Yeah. And I think now, a lot of people are outraged when players come out and they're like, oh, we know how our opposition team's going to play. Yeah. I know how all 20 teams in the Premier League are going to play, but it doesn't mean I'm going to be able to stop it. It doesn't mean I'm going to be able to plan for it. So how much control, how much emphasis is actually on the coaching anymore? Do you know what I mean? Yeah. If everyone's doing the same things on and off the ball, and obviously the tempos are different, maybe the rotation, maybe the left back goes high and the right back tucks in instead of something else. Do you not just think that it's becoming more of not a player game? It's obviously always been a player game, but it's like, we always talk about the individual quality. Yeah. If I've got better players than you, I'm going to beat you.
Well, this is why I kind of always fall back to this idea of player quality, because I think, look, shape and structure, you can only do so much. And I think the bare minimum for a coach should be to have a structure and a shape that gives your team sort of a good chance of not conceding any chances, and then also trying to step up and create some of your own chances. Now, I think games are won and lost when you get your best players on the ball in these structures. Now, I think what we've noticed for the last few years certainly is teams dropping in, blocking space, or now pushing high and pressing man to man. But games are won and lost when certain players can expose the weaknesses of other players. Now, what I mean by this is, if you take Manchester City, for example, we know at Manchester City you've got some good players who can run in behind now. So if a team pushes on you, their weakness is that big space in behind. Then for a Manchester City team, you've got to utilise your strengths and attack that space. Now, everyone knows that Manchester City are probably going to go long with Edison to Erling Haaland. Yeah. So how can you prevent that? The opposition probably think, look, maybe we can sit in deep. Yeah. So it's always these sort of back and forths about minimising your weaknesses and maximising your strengths. I think in football, teams almost get too fixated on the shape and structure, but you've got to maximise your player profiles within that. I always think about Maresca, for example, at the start of the season. I really liked some of his quotes because he was saying that certain players can't invert because they don't have that sort of quality to do so. We can't play with a certain winger because he doesn't provide like the necessary width for another player. And it's about these relationships on top of the actual profile of the player that allow these structures to thrive. I think the structures in and of themselves are only a very small percentage of what makes a team successful and not. But on top of that, like the actual analysis always often falls back on the structure, and I think that's probably doing a lot of these teams a disservice, especially when you watch them. You probably think they're more similar than they are because we're just looking at the shapes, whereas the implementations, like you mentioned,
the principles are quite different. Yeah, I think it's a really good point. I think it's a conversation that's a bit tetchy because some people don't like the idea that football's fallen off, because in a way football's actually gotten too good. That's what's making it bad, because everyone's so good at doing their own things. You're
optimizing. I mean, I think if we go to basketball, for example, I think there's the same conversation happening in basketball about players taking too many threes because the game's almost too optimized. Yeah. You're not getting sort of that mid-range play, which is kind of exciting. And a lot of teams are just doing the same things in terms of getting the ball forward, trying to find the free man, trying to get that 3-point off, and maximizing for that. So the variety in your game is reduced, which is the same that we're seeing in football. The other example I'll actually mention is chess, I think. So in chess, there's the normal form of chess, and it's very optimized in the terms that sort of the best players know generally what sort of moves and what sort of plays work against what certain setups. So there's this form of chess that's becoming more popular, especially by some of the best players in chess. I think it's called blitz chess, where you've only got a certain amount of time before you have to make your move. That added pressure.
It's like creates unpredictability.
Yeah, it creates unpredictability and creates excitement, which is kind of what people wish football kind of had again, and wish basketball was. People are talking about, removing the 3-point line or making it,
further
move further back so
yeah.
that influence is reduced. And I think it's interesting that in maximally optimizing for your respective sports, you're basically getting a reduced enjoyment from the fan.
If you're enjoying the video and want more tactical analysis and podcasts, please press the subscribe button below and hit the bell to enable post notifications. Do you think from an entertainment perspective, football's better when it's worse?
It depends. I think football's better.
It depends how you class worse.
Yeah.
But I think if there's less precise actions, movements and structures set in stone.
But I like goals. I think
it creates excitement.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I like watching. So, for example, I'm not saying these teams are bad, but these teams have unpredictability in their moments, and you never know what you're going to do. Newcastle, Villa, Forest are
I would say Spurs. I would add Spurs.
Spurs too, They can do pretty much everything, and they can do it well. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't mean it's always going to be done consistently.
Yeah.
But they are just all of them can counter-attack, all of them can have the ball. All of them can press high, they can sit low, and they can do everything, and they do everything in the games. I think Newcastle and Villa really do remind me of Ferguson's United.
Yeah.
Really just multi-dimensional, unpredictable attacking teams who can sit off, but then they can also spring these really ridiculously fast counter-attacks, and you don't really know what's going on.
They're attacking in space quickly, as in they're not waiting for teams to form a set block. And I think a lot of the problems come from teams forming that set block. People find it boring to watch one team play against a block of 10 or 11 players in behind the ball, trying to figure out how to break that. I think that's where the boredom typically comes, or through slow play. Bournemouth, for example, we know Iriola, we did a video about him. He prioritizes chaos as a form of attacking principle. Yeah. So in trying to move the players around, in trying to prevent the opposition from setting up a solid, strict defensive shape, he can attack better. That's how he feels his team plays. In the same way Newcastle, in the same way Aston Villa are attacking quickly. In the same way we've seen Real Madrid as well attack quickly.
For sure.
They obviously employ this sort of asymmetry to their teams, and the sort of the quick interplay that we don't always see from positional football.
Do you know I think it's becoming a really big thing in football that's not even about the football.
Yeah.
Load management, the amount of work that's going on.
Yeah.
So I think everything around football at the moment, the way the top managers are playing, the reason why it's so slow is because they don't want the players physically exerting, constantly sprinting. Yeah. They want to have the players as fresh as possible. And the way you keep your players as fresh as possible is by playing ridiculously slow football.
In phases.
In phases. So if you're blocking really low and the team is on the edge of the box, you don't really have that much physical work to do. Whereas if you're pressing high, where if you're pressing high, obviously you're covering 40 yards of space if they break through.
So then attack slower.
Yeah, and I think that's what Arne Slot's doing.
Literally said the exact same argument. It's really frustrating. But I think football, in how many games there are, and in how much physical demand there is on the players, it's becoming a sport of almost pure athleticism. I know that's an oversimplification, but you're losing the competition that allows the best and the most creative and the most artistic players to thrive. It's almost just whoever can,
it's not a gift, is it? It's not a gift. You're not a physical gift. You're your physical specimen.
It's a very logical kind of. And as people like emotion, people like creativity, people like the spectacle. And if you're tired, if your players are getting injured, that also I think contributes to the fact that you can't express that artistic nature in football. It's more just a matter of how can we optimize for lack of injuries, and how can we optimize for keeping our team fit and optimizing for athleticism throughout the team.
The two highest sprints in the Premier League are Bournemouth and Spurs. Yeah, both have got massive injuries. Massive injury crisis. The two lowest, Man City, Arsenal. Yeah, who have got at the moment. Arsenal have got Havertz out and Saka out, but they're starting to get all the players back fit. City haven't really got that many injuries apart from Rodri Akanji.
We had a small squad, so I think here's another issue with ours. We had a small squad. Rodri went out, who had 3,000 minutes for that, or whatever, a ridiculous amount of minutes. So, in everyone else sharing the load, they've been getting injured and rushed back. But
I think squads will become bigger,
Yeah,
I think squads are going to get a lot bigger. I think there's going to be times now where this happened sometimes under you. It happened under Chelsea, obviously, with the amount of players they brought in.
Yeah.
But there will be first team players now who don't even travel to the game, who will be probably starting the next week.
Yeah.
I think it will get to a point where I just think there's so much like physical demand on players. You've seen Ange speaking about it, Amorim speaking about it, Pep speaking about it, and I think there's almost this like idea that because the game is so physically exhausting now,
that's becoming more important than
having more technical players. Like if you ask a manager now, would you rather have a guy who can run like 15k a game
and never be injured
and be available? And obviously this is why the players like Conor Gallagher and even Scott McTominay aren't rated in the public domain as highly as the managers who use them are.
And by the way, they're more technical than people think anyway. But
of course, but like they are probably players who you consider as like athletes rather than like technically gifted footballers. And I think when people don't generally understand why them players are rated, I can't remember who it was with Southgate when he just wouldn't stop picking him.
I thought
Henderson, for example,
Henderson done a brilliant job for Liverpool.
Yeah, and he's just like the ground coverage, the availability, the communication. Them aspects.
You free your better players to kind of do their best work.
And I just think that's what managers now in the top game are more focused on.
Yeah.
They're more focused on the player being available, being consistent, being a communicator, having the capability to run so much throughout the game.
Yeah.
I feel like they would take that now over a guy who's going to put 3 balls in behind perfectly on. Do you know what I mean? I feel like there's that element to it because, it just feels at the moment that the football is kind of losing individuality, and it comes back into it because I think you've got these not Maverick players, you've got these Maverick teams who are like going against the grain. So you've got your Nottingham Forest, as we mentioned, Newcastle's, Bournemouths, who are doing unpredictable things, who are doing unlike top team things and getting good results for it.
I think some coaches, and it's not loads, but I think some coaches have spoken about like the duty for managers to ensure that a team play in an entertaining fashion. Bielsa is one of the main ones because I can't remember the specific quote, but it goes something like, you've got so many fans who they work all week and
all they want to do is watch the footer.
And they've just saved a bit of money to go to the game. They go to the game. This is their one sort of
getaway.
One bit of the afternoon, where it's supposed to just ease all of their struggles. And now they've come to watch you pass sideways between your centre backs and get a 0-0 draw. I think Bielsa thinks that that's an injustice, like morally as a manager.
As a manager to instruct that football.
Yeah, because he thinks entertainment as a manager is a sort of prerequisite to being a good manager. And I understand football's a job and you need to play in a way that's going to get the best results. But I really respect managers, Ange for example, Bielsa for example, who kind of put this at the forefront.
I'd even class Iriola.
I'd put him there. Yeah,
just like it. Yeah, it does have like negative flip sides, a lot of them.
Yeah.
But I feel like when it goes well playing that football, there's
some
just
people will
nothing
honestly
better.
lose more games in a season.
Yeah.
As long as they're not getting relegated and as long as they're sort of relative to their expectations, if they're playing in a manner that gets them up off their feet.
I got battered for saying this on the overlap, but like I think the reason why Liverpool are top of the league by an absolute country mile and that Jurgen Klopp isn't in charge, I think the play style is more controlled and it makes the fans more reserved. Where I think if Klopp was in a title race right now with this Liverpool team playing the prime Klopp football I think it's the best brand of football I've seen for 15 years.
So exciting.
I think it's unbelievable what they were doing.
Yeah.
If that football was happening right now, I just don't see a world in which
Well, I think there would have been injuries at least.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, in moments it can get a bit.
Like I just know that Liverpool fans, that football, there's a reason why they rate him so highly, even though he only won one Prem. And I know it was because you were there. But even if you weren't there and they were like 85 points and the league winners were on 87, whatever, and it was just a standard point season, they would still be looking at it going, no, that's the best football we've ever played. That is it.
100% agree.
And that's what I mean, and I think that's why I defended
When we talk about predictability, I think Liverpool is unpredictable.
Yeah.
We've not necessarily seen. We don't really see that sort of thing. Yeah.
And I just think I look at what Amorim's trying to do at Manchester United, for example, my club, and the slower approach to games I know what he's trying to do, and it's what we're saying. Like, managers are trying to play away now,
and he doesn't want injuries. He's very, adamant about that point as well.
But I just think like it's such a hard balance to find, that it's such a complicated question and such a complicated conversation to have. Where it's like, would you prefer to have a relentless manager who goes for it all the time and never reverts from his principles, but it's really exciting, but it's also
this is why Spurs fans have given Ange some leeway because.
But I agree with them.
Yeah.
And I know it's so hard for them to get behind it. I know it is. Because, like, believe me, like, losing to Leicester at home and Ipswich at home, that's not excusable.
Yeah.
But you need to understand that, like...
He gave them so much joy in that last season,
if it goes really well, the ceiling of the system, like, the ceiling of Ange's system is better than the ceiling of an Amorim system because of the excitement.
It really frustrates me that there's so many games. I think the biggest argument to reduce game time is that with more games, it reduces the ceiling of the product. Like, we can't get
the maximum intensity.
We can't get brilliant Ange teams when there's this many games.
No.
And it's such a travesty. Imagine like a Jurgen Klopp side
with one game a week.
Yeah, I mean, they would win.
Yeah, they'd win everything. Yeah. But it's like Conte's thrown like the Italian Cups.
Yeah.
So he doesn't want to play the Italian Cups when they're not in Europe. We're at Napoli. So we can have one game a week, so they have the best chance at winning titles. And
you see a better Napoli than you've seen for.
That's what I mean, and it's just like the load management. We've seen the Plymouth game with Liverpool, and obviously Liverpool fans were obviously annoyed they went out of the cup, but more importantly, we were like, well, we're going to be fresh. So we're going to be fresh to go for the Champions League, for the Premier League, and you can't say they're wrong because it's right. And I think if you offered managers, do you remember? This new knockout phase they've had into Europe. So like you're in this sixth round of 32,
kind of thing,
the playoff thing with Madrid, and I think United had to win and Spurs had to win to miss that game in the Europa League. And I remember both managers in the press conferences after it were like, "We are so happy we're not," and it's just 2 games. That's all it is, but. They were buzzing. They were so happy.
Travel, prep time. It's about 6 days, 2 games.
And it's like, it felt like we won a trophy. Amorim was like, we're so happy we're going to have the training ground time, the fully fit squad. We're not going to be flying to like Romania to play someone. And I'm like, wow, you see how much they actually want the time off. And I was just like, and then obviously the flip side of you, when Pep was asked about it, and he was like, I don't know how we're going to manage this. And it's just like, 2 games is the difference between a team being fresh enough to go again. And
it's almost sometimes like, look, I'm a devout Manchester City fan, like since the day I was born, but like when there is so many games as well on top of that, like I'm not saying that I'm not excited for when City play, but like you
can expect
it almost passes me by. I'm like, oh, City are playing today. Whereas if it's once a week or even once every 4 or 5 days, I'm like, I'm looking forward to the game. But obviously, we talk about football being predictable and the shape and the structures and the timetable of football. I think one thing that is important that we should probably touch upon is like Mavericks we've spoken about as individuals, but also like the personality of players. I think they kind of get hounded out a little bit, don't you think? Point. I mean, more recently, I think it's sensible if we talk about
Lewis Skelly.
The Skelly situation, the celebration. And look, when people talk about other players doing it, sometimes I think some people get a free pass because it's kind of in their nature or whatever. But other players are kind of, I don't know, hounded out. I'm really a big fan of players kind of showing that personality, especially on the pitch. As long as it's not malicious and it doesn't go off of the pitch. I think it's really nice to see.
I want more of it. Honestly, I want more of it. I think I was going back to this Miles Lewis Skelly stuff as an example. You've got a situation where Man City are playing Arsenal. They've been going head-to-head for 3 years. An 18-year-old lad from Hale End has scored a goal.
Since he was 7-8.
Scored a goal at the Emirates Stadium after Haaland said, who the F are you or whatever. And it's like, why not? Why not? And do you know what? I'll praise him even more if Haaland scores and takes a mick out of Lewis Skelly. That is how it goes. It's back and forth. And I remember
the best rivalry. You think about United and Arsenal in the tunnel. How heated it was.
United Arsenal in the tunnel. You've got Wayne Rooney, Ronaldo shushing in the Highbury net. Like these just little maverick moments that like you get criticised for now, and there's not many left. Like there's really not many left. But like, I loved it when Bellingham and Brahim Diaz started like doing a little dance against it. I just love stuff like that. Yeah. Obviously, it's not great for you, but
no, but like if,
do you know what I mean? There's character in the game.
Thing. Yeah.
And yeah, like, do you know what I always throw it back to? Like, where are people doing like somersaults when they score now?
Like, you're not allowed.
Sports science are honestly, I used to have a picture at home of Lewis Nanny doing like the corkscrew backflip.
Yeah.
That's like one of the best celebrations I've ever seen. Now I just don't see it anymore.
Probably get carded.
You probably would, and it's just like, why? It's like that's like the flair of like scoring and being a character.
I think there is this sort of like I don't know if it's like national wide or just generally in football, but there's almost this kind of need to respect the status quo and like if you're at the top level, be professional and things like that. But I don't think there's any harm in like competitive like displays of like rivalry.
Yeah,
like I think it's nice.
I think it all boils down to rivalry as well, and like I think it all boils down to the game being so intense and like wanting to celebrate something big, but also do it in a way that's like, it's me.
Yeah,
it's
like
a
look,
situation.
everyone got onto, well, not everyone. I think some people got onto Decore for a celebration, but I was a huge fan of Decore celebration, and I was a huge fan of Curtis Jones' reaction to it.
Yeah, because that is a derby.
Yeah, if they come across each other, like I'm sure they're not gonna
be tension in the game, though.
Yeah, in the game there's tension, but like they'll go home and say, look, it's fine what he did. If I was in that situation, whatever, and it's fine that he kind of got onto me because that's the way that the game should be.
So we've just spoke about the character being missing in terms of, you know, players, charisma, celebrations, bit of what was the word you could use for it? Bit of personality, but like a bit of arrogance as well to it, like a bit of camaraderie, a bit of fun. Yeah. And I want to move on to the last question, which is, I think we talked about the personality in terms of playing and scoring and celebrating and be a character off the pitch and be a character on the pitch and stuff like that. I want to talk about players' personality on the pitch when they're playing football and they're scoring, they're taking shots and they're dribbling, being kind of hindered by systematic football. So like in my opinion, like there's certain players who have been refined. I guess you could kind of point this in the way it's an easy example to throw at you, but like Grealish, a player who's, when I watched him at Villa, was more of a direct carrier, was brave, was like kind of more free-flowing flow state kind of player. Yeah. And obviously Pep Guardiola signs him, you play a certain way and he has to play that way, and it's almost like you have roles in a team and the players must fill the roles kind of thing.
Although I think, just quickly, I think that's a little bit of an exception to the general rule because Doku, Savinho, Mavericks,
all like
kind of have been moulded into utilising their strengths.
Yeah.
I think we still use Grealish's strengths, but there have just been, his strengths look a lot less exciting than
in
they did
the role. Yeah, for sure. And I think I just wanted to ask you basically, like, if you've seen a player now, like let's say someone's playing 4-2-3-1.
Yep.
They've got no basically attacking structure, and the 10 is playing right down the centre of the pitch, just behind the number 9, and they're taking the ball, they're doing step overs, they're doing flicks, whatever.
Yeah.
I think that like what's liked now as an entertainer, like if you go and like be entertained by this player, I just think there's so much more goes into it, because like if you look at if you went to go and buy that player now, they'd be like, is he right-sided, is he left-sided, which foot is it? How's his retention? Could he keep the ball?
Yeah. But do you think that's just kind of like our bubble almost? Like,
I don't know. But it's like, I'm trying to think of like a player. I'm trying to think of a player who's just really like does stuff on his own. Like Cole Palmer's obviously the main standout, but he now plays in a really rigid system.
Yeah. I think Cherki's probably the
like Cherki,
one player
for example,
I think of at the moment.
And he's like, so Ryan Cherki has come from, well, he's at Lyon. No one's really took a sniff at, well, no one's really got a bid in for him. Yeah. And he's one of the best young players in the world, technically.
Yeah.
But there is a grey area over him that clearly leaves the elite clubs to skim over him, which all boil down to attitude, systematic use, off the ball use. Where's his actual position? Is he an 8? Is he a 10? Is he a right winger?
He's a footballer, man.
He's a footballer. Yeah. And I just think now, how much do you think football's being hurt by this idea that everyone needs to do a role and do a role well?
Yeah.
Instead of just being like an actual free-flowing, just decent, exciting footballer. Do you know what I mean?
I think some coaches are still utilising players in a way where if they've got enough quality, they've got a freer role.
Yeah.
I think Ancelot is probably the biggest example of that. And when, the podcast we had with Decorah, he gave James Rodriguez this free role, completely free role.
Yeah.
So I still think that there is space for that as long as there's some sort of measures in place to kind of accommodate and balance for that. For me, I think the biggest issue is managers, coaches, teams want a player who, even if they are going to give them freedom, they want to kind of be assured that they'll be able to do some of the other things to not leave the team short in other areas. Now, Leao is not massively in favour at Milan at the moment, as he was sort of a year or so ago, and he's a brilliant player, but that's because perhaps of his out of possession work, for example, and teams are kind of focusing on the collective more than maximising the individual solely. I do think you need to be of a really high enough standard to make that sort of trade-off worth it.
Yeah.
Now, Mo Salah, for example, for Liverpool, is not asked to track back deep and do a lot of defensive work like he did under Jurgen Klopp, for example, and he's putting up the numbers. So in that sense, he's kind of being used more freely, but he's still within this kind of refined boundary. And I think that's probably where the game's at the moment.
Does the level of player have to be almost astronomically high for them to have a free role?
I think so. Or the team has to be of a lower floor where one player kind of is allowed to play. Yeah, at least say at Crystal Palace, for example.
Because I always think about Thomas Tuchel's quote when he was at PSG, where he's talking about giving Neymar and Mbappe complete freedom within a structure.
Yeah.
And I always think about that because, like, that is true, what he's saying. But then I've often watched teams who are completely rigid with certain players in there. And I'm just thinking, is that... And obviously they're doing it to aid the team. Yeah. They're looking at the collective more than individuals. Decorah said that exact thing, actually. Everything's more systematic focus. So they're looking at the collective because it's a team sport. So the individuals are not called upon as much as they once were to win them games. Yeah. But it does, as you're saying, does feel like there's a little bit of like leeway given to Mohamed Salah, Mbappe, even Haaland. Like Manchester City don't press as high as they used to. So, and obviously that has come with a little bit of Haaland not being able to or not wanting to. So it does feel like there are teams now who are adapting to do stuff. But I think if you ask the question to the manager, I think the idea of how they want to play almost overrides how good the players are. I want to play this way. I don't care if you don't necessarily fit into it. So say like Manchester United. If Manchester United had like one of the best wingers in the world, you could even take Rashford. He's not one of the best wingers in the world at the time of recording. But like take Rashford in Amorim's system. Amorim's going to play this way. And even if Marcus Rashford would have been okay inside the left, in one of the left or right tens, he's now at a club higher than Manchester United in the table who use him structurally better. And I just think that's like a manager having an idea that's bigger than the group of players.
Yeah, which I don't like. I think have a general principle, but the fact that we're seeing more managers now kind of be very rigid in that idea, I don't love it. I always think...
And like selling the best players because they don't fit. Do you know what I mean?
I mean, for me, that doesn't make sense. You've got your best players, see how they can work within a general principle. Everyone talks about Guardiola sit of having his model or whatever, but his biggest strength is getting his best players and utilising their qualities. Marmoush is an in-behind runner. City are a team that sit like high up and pen teams in, but Marmoush has scored 2 or 3 goals and scored the hat-trick in the game just gone by, as you know, when we're recording this, because Guardiola's used him in that way. And I think more coaches need to be doing that. And yeah, we're not necessarily seeing that kind of punt being taken on sort of more brilliant players, and it's quite frustrating.
Because I think Enzo Maresca's probably come under scrutiny quite a lot recently from Chelsea fans because he's as we describe him, he's a very, very rigid coach. And
at the beginning he was less so, I would say,
he did adapt early on, but I think as the season's gone on, he's tried to make his team a little bit more static, positional, players in certain zones. And I'm looking at, for example, you could say Cole Palmer, but I do think Cole Palmer is best in the right half space. I'm looking at the player who's playing next to him. It's usually Enzo Fernandez, sometimes it's Marc Cucurella. And I don't believe that them players suit that position. I think he's looking at his system. He's going,
though I think they're better there than they are probably deeper or probably wide, but they're not an ideal player in that area, are they?
No, and I feel like it's becoming more of a thing now where you make a system and then you drop players into it. And you have a coach for an idea, almost like a football manager setup where you've got all the roles and the spaces are blank, and then you buy or integrate or promote any player to play in each position gradually as you go up the squad. And I feel like if a coach doesn't have that, then he ultimately fails straight away. Yeah,
but I'm probably leaning towards the fact that if somebody is as rigid as that description, I don't think you can be bound for massive success.
No.
At least in the long term, it's probably a bit better because things go your way. But
is a team going to have the patience, or the players going to have the patience to buy into it?
And once the players are kind of familiar with it, you need specific players to kind of do that role. And I don't really love it. I think iterate based on player quality, but keep that sort of fundamental idea there.
Because having players to buy into a system, so you have to get players to get wins under the belt to convince them that this idea is good enough. If you're coming into a team now, and I keep going back to Man United because it's the best case of it, it's a brand new system, the players don't have a clue what it is in comparison to the old one. You've got to convince them players that system's working. You've come in, you've put the system in place, you've put the players that you think are the best like-for-like fits, and it's not working. Obviously, the rationale to everyone is that you need to change. It's not working. And the manager ultimately won't change.
No.
And it's like the fine balance of, do you prefer a manager to change or not?
No, I think keep your principles, but adapt within that.
Right, thank you very much for watching this episode of the Overlap Breakdown podcast. If you did enjoy, please don't forget to like, comment and follow us. And we'll be back next week for more Premier League reviews. Thank you.